Hey everybody, Gromos here with another War Thunder Simulator battle video, and today I will take at another BF-109 again, which are among my favorite planes in War Thunder. This time I will take a look at the BF-109 E-3, one of the early ones we have in game, and one I did not make a video about in Simulator Battle yet. And in case you are wondering why I fly the E-3 instead of the newer E-4, that is because the E-4 still does not have a proper cockpit and uses the G2 cockpit, and I think that just looks weird. Anyway, some basic infos about the BF-109 Emil before we look at a few engagements in it. Now, since I had BF-109s quite a few times on the channel already, I will keep it short. The BF-109 was developed in the mid-30s, competing for a contract for the new standard short-range fighter of the Luftwaffe and using at the time modern concepts like closed cockpits, stressed skin construction, retractable landing gear and so on, and with an emphasis of speed over maneuverability. A concept that many of the old pilots that flew in World War I were at first not very convinced by. World War I fighter ace Ernst Udet, for example, famously criticized that the BF-109 would never be a fighter with its monoplane construction and closed cockpit, like in the biplane fighters in service at the time. However, this kind of critique stopped quickly after the BF-109 in mock fights proved that it could successfully fight and win versus multiple Heinkel 51 biplanes, the standard fighter at the time, using its superior speed in high-speed slashing attacks. Early BF-109s still had the Junkers Jumo engine with only about 700 horsepower output. The E version, or Emil, was the first fitted with the new Daimler-Benz 601 engine, which produced a maximum of 1100 horsepower. A further change that was introduced was, with the E3 version, the replacement of the wing machine guns with 20mm MGFF cannons. The machine gun-armed E1 and the cannon-armed E3 entered production at roughly the same time, at the end of 1938. The MGFF cannons have, as is well known for 20mm cannons, somewhat unimpressive performance characteristics, with a low rate of fire as well as a low muzzle velocity, making aiming harder. However, at the time there were not that many alternatives, and the MGFF was very lightweight, only about half the weight of other aircraft 20mm cannons of the time, and the BF-109 is all about lightweight. Now, when flying the BF-109 E-3, as with all BF-109s, it is generally a good idea to keep your speed up, as the plane was designed for high-speed hit-and-run attacks, and while the E is a lot lighter than later BF-109s and therefore can still turn with quite a few of the opponents it will meet, a lot of them also turn better. You are faster than some of them in the E-3, but not all. Specifically, early Spitfires won't be much slower, or not at all, since even the Mark I in War Thunder gets access to 100-octane fuel, introduced during the Battle of Britain in 1940, while the E-3 is a 1939 plane. But if flown correctly, the BF-109 Emil is extremely dangerous, and of course very good when fighting in the vertical. Well, that is a basic overview of the plane. Let's take a look at a few engagements in it. Now, this is a EC battle on the Ruhr map versus the Allies. And I'm just on my way back out after having unlocked the BF-109 E-3 and having picked it up on the airfield. I saw a few planes on lower altitude and I started to descend towards them to take a look what is down there. As I get close enough, I can identify the plane I am closing in on at the moment as a P-40. However, before I can attack it, there's another friendly fighter coming in from above. The friendly plane is a Heinkel 112. Now, the 112 is a good turner, and diving down from above it can close in on the P-40 quickly, so no need for me to go after the P-40 as well, we would just be in each other's way. And since we are close to the enemy airbase, it can be assumed that the P-40 is not alone and will get help eventually. So, as I always do, I stay above them and cover the Heinkel 112. From my position above the 112 and the P-40, I can react to enemy planes arriving in the area to help the P-40, and can dive on them should they go after the 112. Or, should I get attacked, I have some altitude to play with and react to the threat. A second P-40 on low altitude gets taken out by another 109 just as I see it, and then the first P-40 is taken out by the Heinkel 112 without any new threats appearing here. There is, however, another friendly plane calling for help nearby, and with those two enemy planes taken out, I change my course there to help whoever is in trouble. And so is the Heinkel 112, which also changes course in that direction of the distress call. Flying in that direction, there are a few groups of planes I can spot, and I'm not sure at first which one is the one who called for help, but there's one plane with smoke on, and I assume this is where the call came from, and I close in on it. The friendly plane with smoke, though, gets taken out before I can get there by a Spitfire. I do now, however, have the altitude and speed advantage over this Spitfire. And I go in to attack the enemy plane. The trick here is to keep the speed high and not be tempted into a maneuvering fight, in which the Spitfire of course has the upper hand. As long as you do that, the Bf-109 Emil should be able to keep its advantage up without a problem in this situation. Now, the Heinkel 112 also arrived on the scene and is engaging the Spitfire. However, unlike with the P-40, the 112 can't outturn a Spitfire. At least not an early one, and the Spit is quickly getting the upper hand. I meanwhile go up in a wide loop, keeping the energy state high by not turning too tight, and then dive back down on the Spitfire. I hope to get a shot as I come back down, but I don't get a good angle on the Spitfire as he turns after the Heinkel 112, so I have to go back up. Now, this time I turn around tighter to get back on target faster and get pressure off the 112. That also wastes energy faster, but the Spitfire is not fighting me, so that's not as big of a deal, though I still want to keep up as much energy and speed as possible in case of other planes coming in. This time I get an angle on the Spitfire and fire a burst on it, but I don't know if I did any damage or not. And then I go back up in the vertical. Diving back down though, I can see that I won't get an angle on the Spitfire diving down on it, so I pull a bit up and extend and then turn around to go after the Spitfire, approaching it from behind when it passes below me. I would have hoped that my first attack would get the Spitfire off the 112's tail and it can get out of here, but for now it seems the Spitfire is still after the Heinkel. So I close in again and I get another quick burst off, though again I don't know if I hit or not. Now, the Spitfire turns to the left, and since I can't turn tight enough to follow it and I don't want to waste energy trying, I go back up in the vertical. Now though, it seems that the Spitfire is finally off the 112's tail and the 112 could leave the area. The Spitfire is now turning in my direction, and I plan to dive down behind it to attack from the rear again when it passes below me, though I also keep an eye on the Spitfire so I can go up in the vertical should the Spitfire, instead of passing below me, decide to pull up to attack. But it does not, and I can close in on the Spitfire, which starts to turn to the left again. I place my crosshair in front of the Spitfire and fire a burst, hoping it flies through my fire, but I am a bit too high. But just when I want to pull up again, the Spitfire rolls around and changes direction, and that makes him fly through my gun sight again, and I can fire another burst, and this time I definitely got a few hits. I tried to go for a third attack, but I did not get the shot and instead start to pull up again. I lost some of my energy advantage in this last attack, but I still have enough to climb away. However, coming around again to attack, it seems the last attack did some serious damage to the Spitfire. Its engine is out and the Spitfire goes down. I don't get credit for it though. Now I have to say, I personally don't care much if I get kills awarded or not. I learned years ago that multiplayer games are just more fun if you don't care about stats, so I don't. But whether this bothers me or not, the fact that this bug after all those years is still not addressed and even seems to be getting worse is a little embarrassing. Seems to me it should not be that hard to just set it up in such a way that the plane that goes down, say after 5 minutes after taking hits, can never just crash, but will always award a kill if it got damaged by someone within a certain time frame. Just another one of those things that after so many years simply have to be addressed one day. World of Warplanes managed to get this right on the first try during the alpha. Just weird that some cases I get a kill for a guy I can't even remember shooting anymore after he crashes on the airfield on landing ages ago after I hit him once, but then I can shoot the engine of a Spitfire and it goes down seconds later and it just crashes. Again, even though it does not bother me much, that is just something that should work in a multiplayer game. In any case, after this little tussle with the Spitfire, I climb back up to altitude and move in the rough direction of the enemy airfield, and I can soon spot the plane coming towards me from that direction. I'm not sure what it is, though I assume it is another Spitfire at this point. Since it is climbing up from lower altitude towards me while I'm diving towards it, I know I am at a higher energy state, as I am building up speed while he is losing it. So I just go up in the vertical as we merge to get above the enemy plane and then start attacking it from above again. The enemy plane though, a P-40 as it turns out, though seems to lose sight on me because as I come around to attack it, the P-40 does not do any evasive maneuvers. Maybe he did not realize I went straight up as we merged. As I dive back down towards the P-40, it just keeps going straight and I can close in from behind and line up a good shot from a reasonable close range. I fire as I am close enough and I get a good hit with the 20mm cannons, apparently hitting a fuel tank and setting the P-40 on fire. And then closing in a bit more, I fire a few more machine gun bursts to do some additional damage without wasting any more cannon shells than I have to, as I have a very limited supply of those. and the P-40 goes down shortly after that. Now I climb a bit and look around for other targets. And after a bit of that I look back and I can see I have another enemy plane coming in from behind. Taking a closer look at it, I at first identify it as a Wildcat, which turns much better than my Bf-109, so I get the nose pointed down to use my superior speed to open up the distance, also calling for some assistance. I start to make my way back in more or less the direction of the friendly airfield. The Wildcat, or what I think is a Wildcat, starts to fire at long range, and he has the ammo for it in those 50 cals. Once or twice he gets a lucky hit in, but there's not much you can do about it. Any fancy evasive maneuvers in this situation would just shorten the distance and make it easier for the Wildcat to get in fire range. And since the Wildcat is a much better turner than the Bf-109, trying to go into a turn fight is a bad idea and should only be a last-ditch effort. The best course of action in this situation is to just keep opening up the distance. Now, looking back I can see that I have two planes behind me, and I at first assumed there are two enemy planes following me, but as it turns out the second one is a friendly, responding to my earlier call for assistance, and forces the enemy plane to break off the pursuit and react to the newcomer, a Heinkel 112, which of course gives me the opportunity to turn around and go on the offensive again. I climb a bit while turning around and dive back towards the two planes that are now fighting. As I get closer I can see that the enemy plane is not a Wildcat after all, but the F2A3 Buffalo. That makes little difference though, since the two planes are similar and I can't turn with the Buffalo any better than I would have with a Wildcat. I fire burst at the Buffalo and then go back up. As I loop around though to attack the Buffalo again, another enemy plane suddenly makes an appearance, a Spitfire, and he is going after the Heinkel 112. So as I dive back down I switch targets and try to attack the Spitfire to get him off the 112's tail. I fire a quick burst at the Spitfire as I pass it, and at first I thought I missed it, but as it turns out I hit the tail and probably took out the tail control, and the Spitfire goes down. However, taking out the Spitfire gave the Buffalo an opportunity to attack again. I take a few hits and start dive towards the deck to evade. However, since I also took some hits in the wing, I lose lift in the right wing and the plane almost stalls. I just about managed to get it stabilized and pull out of the dive without stalling the plane, though the trees in the area might be a bit shorter now. The Buffalo on the other hand did not manage to pull out and went in. Looking back I can see the Heinkel 112 as well as another plane behind me, which I assumed at first is also enemy, so I called for assistance again, but that plane is also friendly. Now, with my plane pretty beat up, I start to make my way back towards the airfield to land. With especially the right wing pretty damaged and not producing the normal amount of lift, I plan on landing at somewhat high speed, since the plane has a tendency to roll to the right, which gets worse as I slow down, and with the stall speed of the right wing being lower than that of the left now, you don't want to get too slow at low altitude, because if the right wing stalls and the left does not, you will spin around. I put the flaps down to their combat setting. Putting them down all the way to landing is a bad idea, as one could be damaged and not come out, and when only one flap extends you have the same problem. With extending the flaps just a little bit you can still compensate in this case and get them back in, but if you put them all the way down and one of them does not come out, it's hard to prevent a spin. But both flaps do come out and increase the lift a little bit, and I can land without further incident and get my plane repaired and refueled. And after doing so I get back in the air and make my way back towards the middle of the map looking for targets. I close in on two planes I could see flying in formation and I approach them to investigate, but they turn out to be NPC planes, friendly ones even. However, I'm not the only one who spotted them. A Spitfire is also coming in and attacking them and has apparently not seen me, so I can slot in behind the Spitfire and attack it. I fire a long burst at the Spitfire, which eventually bursts into flames, and I break off, assuming that the Spitfire will go down, to look out for other enemy planes that might be in the area, as just after an attack is in my experience one of the most common times to be attacked yourself, with enemy planes having an opportunity to close in on you while you are focused on your target. But I can't see any other enemy planes at this time. However, the Spitfire is not on fire anymore and not going down yet either, as I have hoped it would. And I even have to start to evade as the Spitfire turns towards me to prevent it getting a shot at me. I pull up to get above the Spitfire to attack it again from above. But just when I am about to do so, in a repeat of the last fight, a Brewster Buffalo shows up too, slotting in behind me. Now, with the Buffalo behind me and the Spitfire still in the fight apparently, I again use the better speed of my Bf-109 to gain some distance and dive away from the fight. as I have no interest in being in a turn fight with a Buffalo in the Spitfire at the same time, even if the Spitfire is damaged. The Spitfire though does however eventually go down, and the Buffalo, while following me, is again being attacked by a Heinkel 112, and I turn around to attack it again. This time I was a little bit further away though when I started to turn around, and I needed a little bit longer to get back to the fight. Once I do arrive back at the scene, I try to get a deflection shot on the Buffalo as I pass it, but I'm not sure if my shots hit. I don't think so, at least I can't see any obvious sign of damage, and then I go back up again to start to dive back down on the Buffalo and attack it from above. As the Buffalo passes me, I come down behind the Buffalo and try to get a shot at it, but as it turns hard to the left, I can't quite get my sights to where I need them to be, and I have to pull up again and come around for another try. In the meantime, the Heinkel 112 goes down. Those A models stall a lot easier in War Thunder than they should, and are very hard to fly in a turn fight. Now, the Brewster Buffalo in the meantime passes below me and I dive back down towards it, but again I don't get my sights to where I need them to be and I have to pull back up. The Buffalo seems to be pretty low on speed and energy by now though. Now the Buffalo circles around and then starts to move in the direction of the enemy airfield, and I, after looping around, can come back down behind it. This time, as the Buffalo is flying somewhat straight, I can get the sights on target and fire a burst. I don't know if I got a hit in this first burst, but the Buffalo starts to pull up after it, and I manage to get one more burst off before I have to pull up again, and this time I get a good hit and that one takes out the Buffalo's tail control. And the enemy plane goes down. Now there's a friendly plane calling for help nearby over an abandoned airfield, so I start to move in that direction. As I arrive there is one enemy plane, a Spitfire, and I attack it. The Spitfire turns out of the way though, and I have to break off the attack, climbing above the Spitfire to get ready to attack again a second time. This time though I make a mistake. The Spitfire pulls up into me and I don't notice it fast enough, and I start to evade a little too late, and my PF-109 takes a hit and goes down. So this is it for this sortie in the PF-109 E-3. And since it was getting late, I called it a night at this point. Now the PF-109 E-3 is a fun little plane which I like all PF-109s and enjoy a lot, so by now I should have almost all PF-109s featured on the channel, though the early P1 is still missing. Maybe I'll feature that one too. And well, this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.